Okay, because we've had quite a lot of, we've listened to a lot of people talking today, I'm just going to ask everybody just for 5 minutes and then open it up into a bigger discussion. One of the things that I'd like to focus on a little bit, because we have obviously heard a lot of criticism, is some ways forward, maybe some strategy would interest me now, but let's see what happens. So are you going first?
Why not?
Yes.
What should I say?
Do you have anything prepared, or you just?
Yeah, I have a slide.
Oh, sorry. Somebody does the slide.
It's there.
Okay. All right.
So hello. It's really nice to be in another art school. It's my first other art school here in London. So it's kind of nice to leave my own campus. We had just 2 weeks ago, we had Gary Kennedy speaking. He was the president of the Nova Scotia College of Art and Design in Canada for a long time. And he gave a book launch and a presentation about the last art college. And what was really remarkable, when the students asked him what was so special about this art college, he said it was not about art students. And that put a slight shock, I think, into the auditorium. That was, of course, full of our students. But I think there is something very important to that. And that is, what is an art school beyond the students? What does it produce? And what kind of position does it put out into the world? And I just couldn't join this morning because I had yet another target meeting, recruitment targets, research targets, student stuff, ratio, debates. And at one point you really wonder, what are you still doing in an art school? And I think in that respect, it was really crucial to be reminded by Gary, what might an art school be beyond the students? And it's really, to me, very crucial. I worked before at MIT, which is a research university. And to me, also art schools, like research universities, always provided the opportunity that the students are very close to the laboratories, to the labs of the professors, to kind of encounter science in the making. And to me, art schools were always about art in the making, and to be with peers who might be a few years older than us, but really have already the experience beyond our generation when I was an art student. And in my school, well, the professors weren't there too much. I come from a German art school. So Sigmar Polke, one of our professors, was in constant rehab somewhere in Ceylon. Like one of my professors in stage design, he was very busy in the theater. But we all would meet under the label of these professors and what they stand for. And so it was really critical, who are your peers, and like the alliances you make in the school. For me, a good art school has a very good library that is accessible. It has a good canteen, and it has a lot of space in between. And today, like giving all of these pressures on higher education, I think we lose a lot what really stimulates not only art, but also science. And that is a free space for experimentation and of thinking. And I think this is to a certain extent, specifically in the UK, where I'm fairly new, lost. And I think we really have to reclaim that space of free thinking and also this space of experimentation beyond target numbers. Also, I want to say, for example, I'm still on the board of the Bauhaus. The Bauhaus is a school that only lasted in its 3 iterations for 19 years. But the legacy it left is enormous. The Black Mountain College, or even places like the independent study program, in the Whitney program. So I think it does not always need this formality of the universities that we have today to really create an environment that produces interesting artists, and I mean artists of all kind of genres and innovative thinkers. And I always tell to my students, if you don't need the degree, you don't need to attend those schools and pay all of this tuition. You really can join forces together. If you're in a city like London, there are so many free lectures that you can attend and then use the money to rent a studio together and do stuff together. If you want to teach in the future, you need the degrees. Then you have to attend the school. And then it's crucial what kind of curriculum is provided and what kind of infrastructure do you have. And
okay,
then,
I'm gonna stop
Yeah.
you there. I think this idea of a kind of organic
yeah, that's fine. I just want to say,
institution.
it's really, the question is to me really, do we need this kind of art
Yeah.
schools, and what is the
I
alternative?
think that's a great question. Right, I'm going to move on to Sally now.
It's not mine.
No, it's
Natasha.
Natasha, sorry. Natasha.
I'm Natasha. I've been asked to talk a little bit about myself because I'm a recent-ish University of the Arts graduate. So I graduated from Central St Martin's in product design coming up to about 10 years ago now, which has gone really quickly and really slowly at the same time. I was just thinking about what Johnny Vegas was just saying, actually, because I never meant to go to art school. I was supposed to be an academic and go to Oxford and do English and that kind of thing. So I thought I'd go to art school, do foundation, and get that art thing out of my system, which, as we all know, you can't get it out of your system. So I stayed and I did product design. And I actually really struggled on my degree. And I struggled coming out of my degree as well because I didn't really neatly fit into a bucket because I'm not bucket-shaped. And I tried. I tried very hard, but I was very lucky that on my graduation day, I won New Designer of the Year at a New Designers Exhibition. So that sort of changed everything for me. I was just telling someone today that on my graduation day, I thought, it's fine, I can go do something else. But because I won that award, it sort of catapulted me into the creative world. I was lucky enough to travel around the world exhibiting my work. But what I realized when I was at university was that, number one, I didn't fit into these sort of neat buckets. Number two, I didn't want to be a Mac monkey. I didn't want to be a hired gun. But I did want to be a creative thinker. That's what really made me excited. And I wanted to find something that used all of my skills, not just the ones on the piece of paper that was given to me by the university. So I moved to New York. I worked there on and off for 8 years. And because I had to specialize in something, because that's the way the world worked, I specialized in packaging design, which I found a little bit unfulfilling. But what was great was that packaging agencies that I was working at started to get innovation briefs. And innovation was something that I felt used all the parts of what I could do. So I was using my brain, I was using my creativity and my personality as well. So innovation meant I was creating stuff from scratch. So I was creating a product, I was creating the way it looked, the way it sounded, its visual language, copywriting, everything, which was really, really exciting to me. And at the time I was teaching at Pratt Institute in Brooklyn, and I was teaching a packaging course, and I approached the head of the department, VisCom, and said, I want to create an innovation syllabus. And as far as I know, it was the only creative innovation syllabus in the world at the time, which they let me do. So I had students coming in doing stuff completely from scratch, that completely different from what they'd been doing before. And that was brilliant. I think it was successful because it was a first class to fill every semester, which was great. And from there, I was lucky enough to meet my business partner, Ben Slater, who's the head of business development at BBH Advertising Agency in New York. And 4 years ago, we both moved back to London to start Bow & Arrow. It's a great time to start a creative agency in the middle of a recession. But we persevered, and 4 years later, we've got 40 people. We work with a load of blue chip clients, a few more on there. We work with the Guardian, actually, and the Times newspaper, and a few others. And we're about half designers. And what's really, really important to me is that my designers apply their creative thinking and process to a variety of problems and issues and opportunities for big businesses. So they're taken very seriously in big businesses. And they can do anything. They're not in buckets. They can do web. They can do apps, they can do brands, they can do services, they can do interiors, it just doesn't matter. And what I believe the future of creativity is, and I'm reticent to say art or design, is a recategorization from subjects, so from technical specialists to creative skills. Because I really believe that the creative skills, thinking and process that we have can be transferred and applied to anything at all, and absolutely anything. And that to me will fundamentally change the way that we and people perceive our value and worth. And that's what's really I feel really passionately about. And that whether that's the government or art schools or future employers, is if we start to recategorise that perception of our worth, that will change how society sees us, but I think even more importantly, how we see ourselves as artists and designers.
Thank you, thank you. So we could talk about some of the divisions between the fine arts, design and stuff later when we come back to discussion. Okay, and who's, I have to, is Bob?
I think it's me now.
Okay.
So thinking about strategies, how to advocate the arts is really what I've been thinking about for the last few years. And it comes about really from thinking about, Michael Gove and his kind of real anti-culture, really, saying to children, effectively, culture is really not worth studying, making it second class. And I know lots of people have said that already, but it's an important thing to understand in the context of democracy. And one of the people I really love is the German theorist Hannah Arendt. And Hannah Arendt said that democracy was about freedom, it was about association, and it was about participation. And I think people, all of you in the room, who understand what art schools are about, understand that actually that's a key element of what art schools are about. They're about association, they're about free thinking, like Uta was saying, and they're also about participation, asking people to be involved. And when you ask people to be involved, you ask them to be involved in society, you ask them to develop their voice, you ask children to sing, you ask people to, like Johnny Vegas, that incredible journey of his to be able to be this person that he is, and to have that power, and that art gives children power, and that access is so important. So my concerns aren't really necessarily with the nature of art schools, because I think art schools could become incredibly pointless. And they could become incredibly pointless if access isn't given to all people to get involved in higher education. They could become pointless like they were essentially in the 1920s and 30s, when we didn't have an idea that developed after the war, that we would have polytechnics, and these places would become places where the access to those skills and abilities and teaching was the idea that was going to give that to, we were going to give that to everybody. And it's a very important point to make, because culture, really great culture, is not made by single groups. It's made when you get collisions of different peoples coming together. It doesn't matter if they're different ethnicities or classes, but that relationship that we know and understand in the post-war period of, kids who are dirt poor but incredibly talented, and sometimes the flaneurs who've got some money but are not that talented. When they get together, then you get incredible culture, and the evidence of that is the manufactured and art culture of the 50s, 60s and 70s in this country. Art schools will become pointless if they don't push that idea about access to culture. And that's why the panel discussion that we had at the end of the morning session was so heartening, because people really care about this. And the problem, what is going to happen in this country, we have to think about what the next move is. The government now is lending all this money to you guys to study your degree courses, okay? The next stage is when they don't lend you the money because they can't afford to do it anymore. Because the government are keeping the banks afloat, the banks need to do something, so they lend the money to kids to study these arts and humanities courses. The next stage is when they say, we're only going to make the loans available to those studying science courses. And that's what we need to think, and we need to combat that and really powerfully say what we want to happen. And the way that we do that is actually not by saying the same thing, not that we must actually fully articulate our own agendas in these different things. Design is different from fine art. But my dynamic is to think about artists are cats. They're very difficult to herd together. And so I've developed this thing called the Art Party Conference, and you're all invited to come to it and say exactly what you want to happen. So thinking about the agenda of the future. What is the what do we want art to do in the future? And there'll be lots of different conversations about that. But it'll also not be a conference, because we all know from our experience today that conferences are a bit grim. So it's going to be a kind of art fair. So and UAL are involved in this. The ArtQuest gang are going to bring up coaches of people. The university where I teach, which is the CAS, which is part of London Metropolitan University, we're bringing our students up. I invite you to come up, and we're going to have a fantastic fair where we show people's work. We're going to make a recreation of the Stiff Records Tour film, where we get lots of squabbling artists on buses, all arguing about what art is about, and we're going to film them, and we're going to use a film to advocate to government why art is important, and ask people what people's first experience of art was. And the problem, and one of the things is that when you charge for art education, you know, you can charge to a certain degree and you won't stop people coming. And people do actually value things that they pay for on some level, but then you increase that, and then you stop lending people money to do it. And then you get a real problem. But that problem already exists in in postgraduate education, right? Because in the arts, there's no funding for postgraduate education. And what that does, ladies and gentlemen, it makes quite decent people do things that you wouldn't imagine, you wouldn't see them ever doing. You know, it makes them go out, you know, quite distinguished British artists are going out advocating their courses to people like Johnny Vegas, who doesn't really need to do a fine art course anymore. But they go out advocating their MAs. Now, ladies and gentlemen, how much does a MA at Royal College cost, Uta?
I think for Homeland, as they call it, and EU students, with the bursaries, it's about 6,000.
6,000.
I think it's a bit more.
6,400 pounds, ladies and gentlemen. You can come to the CAS. I'm going to give that to you there. I'm going to make that a reality for you. That's the cheapest. We are affordable education at the CAS. We are all about widening, not for you, for him, widening participation. And just remember, widening participation is about punters.
I want Sally to participate, so there is a point at which you have to come back.
Anyway, if you want to come to the CAS, you're very, very welcome. It's the Bauhaus of the East End, ladies and gentlemen.
I'm really sorry to stop you. I just want Sally to...
No, it's good to stop you.
It's good to stop. Yes, but we'll all come to your party. But...
I'll give you an MA.
Oh, free! Great. Sally.
I feel that I've been very lucky. I grew up through a period of time where I've had the opportunity to experience the transformative potential of art from a very young age, where I went to school in Leeds, and we had an artist in residence in my school, David Nash, and I think I was about 14, and he came and made a sculpture and set fire to it, and I couldn't believe we were allowed to set fire to it. I didn't understand that was the sculptural process at the time. I just thought we'd vandalised it. And then I went to Jacob Kramer, which was the local art school, because I was identified with a group of other people as being someone who really wasn't ever going to be able to do anything else other than art. And I went there. And then I was able to go to art school, where I did a degree in something called Art and Social Context, actually in the southwest, in Dartington. I just went as far away as I could see from Leeds to get out of the city. And that was an extraordinary education, where I was taught by inspiring people, and we lived, I was taught in a very small group. There were only 30 people in my year. We were taught by really incredible people like Lucy Lippard, had amazing people visiting us. And I think, modelled on this image is an image from Black Mountain College, and it's Buckminster Fuller with his colleagues and students building a geodesic dome. And I think the fact that I was able to experiment, that we studied politics, we studied feminism, we studied film theory, at no point did I think about anything other than wanting to be an artist and thinking about how I wanted to change the world. And then I worked as an artist for a number of years, and then I went to the Royal College of Art actually to do a curatorial MA. And all of this was subsidised right the way through. At no point did I ask myself, can I afford to go to college? Because if I had, there is no way I would have done it. I was the first person in the family ever to go into higher education. My parents thought I was completely wasting my time, that I should train to be a secretary, because that's a transferable skill, and there is nothing wrong with having transferable skills. But I think the transferable skills I learnt at art school have led me now to be in a position where I'm the director of the UK's largest visual arts project based in Liverpool, and it's really also been an amazing opportunity to work outside of London, in a city that's facing massive post-industrial decline, a city that no longer makes anything. I mean, anyone who has come from or has lived in the north knows that we have to rethink and recreate those places and rethink and create our cities in the face of late capitalism. And the way we're going to do that is through artists, is through philosophers, is through thinking differently. Many people have spoken about how art school teaches you to rethink the world. I think art school teaches you to rebuild the world and to change the world. And so what I think what the point of art school is really the same question of what's the point of art and what's the point of artists. It's absolutely crucial that we have healthy access to the arts in our culture if we want to produce thinkers and producers of ideas and not just consumers of culture. And I think that art is the place where we reimagine the world, where we test value, where we express our anxieties, our fears, our hopes, and where hopefully we can rethink the future. And in Liverpool, where I'm very privileged to be able to commission work from leading artists all over the world that animates the city, I could not do it without the art school. And the art school is the heartbeat of that city for me. And without a healthy arts infrastructure, it's not possible for us to think of that as a thinking, living city. So I don't quite know what the future holds because I am very anxious about access to the arts. But like Uta, I believe our cultural institutions are doing amazing jobs of making it possible for people to engage with culture. I think it's important to look outside of the capital and think about what's possible. But I also think that art schools have a role in potentially also thinking about rethinking arts education in our schools and starting at a very young age. Because I know that transformative experience of meeting David Nash, and he made me watch a Tarkovsky film at 14, which, you know, I thought was incredibly boring, but I know changed my life. So,
I'm just going to quickly respond, and then I'm going to open it out and then ask you to respond too. There seems a little bit of a theme emerging here about taking stuff outside of art school, something more organic, using what's already there. As you said, do people need degrees? Certainly taking out of London. But then we look at what's happening in places like Newcastle, where, you know, it's just been decimated.
50% cuts.
50% cuts, yeah. I'm really surprised that today no one's mentioned the Olympics, because that was meant to be, wasn't it, the high point of showing that we were this fantastically creative nation, and that all happened, and that was all lovely. And then what? Then what happened? You know, I want to know what happened post-Olympics. And I'd also like people to talk a little bit more maybe about, as Sally mentioned, what's actually happening in schools, because I don't think anybody will get to do A-level art, never mind GCSE or the EBAC or whatever it is now, because, you know, my kids, you know, it's been, art is extra curricular now, as is music. Only middle-class people can really do art and music or drama. These are things that you have private tutors for. The national curriculum, and this is not just the Tories, New Labour did it, have squeezed out art, that's it. So we are in a culture that is not valuing in any way early art education. So why will we value it later on? But at the same time, we are told that there is this sort of economic value, and as I said, everybody was sort of brought together supposedly around the Danny Boyle ceremony where we demonstrated our creativity. You may disagree, but that seemed a moment where people said, oh yeah, I get it now. I get it now. I get that we are quite good at this. But then that all sort of vaporised, didn't it? Or maybe not. I don't know.
But I think I would like to go back also to Natasha, and I would disagree with you. Like, I would not put science and art into a kind of like oppositional structure. I think this is what governments try to do, to say science is valuable, art is not valuable. But my colleagues, for example, when I was at MIT, they struggle the same in science, because what is supported is directed science. It's like science that has a goal, that has an end result, and that gets a grant. And they were often looking to us and said, like, you can still free think, you can do a free thinking, you can experiment, you might discover something that we don't, because we have to know already the result before we even start. So I would follow what Natasha says. What is this kind of thinking that is produced like through arts? And that could be philosophy, writing. Like, is this kind of not knowing where you go? You don't know the result, and you might struggle, and you might not have an answer, and you might fail. And I think this is essentially crucial to us as human beings, to fail, not to know where to go, and to see this as part of how we are, and not being always result-oriented that leads then to a consumer orientation. And I think in that way, the arts are still very much contributing in general to knowledge production, to a different way of thinking and doing things, not only in the arts.
I agree with you, but today is a day when 11-year-olds are being tested on punctuation, grammar.
No, but this is what I'm saying.
You know,
I think they need that, not just to become artists. I think even if you want to be a mathematician, you need an arts and a music education in school.
I completely agree. But,
so I fully agree.
But we're just going in the opposite direction to the things that you're saying.
Well, I was just, the only thing is that it's undergraduate education. It's a technocratic point, but they did remove all the funding to arts and humanities universities. So it's just, all I'm saying is that we ought to fund all of those things, actually. I'm not saying that the arts shouldn't be funded.
By that, no, could you just explain that a bit more? You mean humanities and all the stuff that was
Well,
removed?
yeah, it's all the, philosophy courses, language courses, everything lost it. It's a very interesting point, actually, the Brown Review, you know. Lord Brown is the chairman of the Tate. I'll be sitting with him all day tomorrow on the board of the Tate.
Is he coming on this bus?
Let's see if he does. But everybody was very upset about the fees tripling. But actually, I mean, that was a terrible thing to do, absolutely terrible, ridiculous thing to do. But he privatised the arts and humanities education. People didn't have the foresight to understand what that actually was. And that's changed the nature of, you know, it was a real watershed for the government. Fantastic, we can do that. And the Brown Review wasn't brought in by the Conservative government. They just said, oh, thank you very much. That was handed over by Peter Mandelson and the Labour government. So there is an imperative on us to understand the politics of art and culture in this country and really drill down into it and tackle these people and say exactly what we want to happen, not always to oppose, but to say what the future is and what the disbenefits of doing the things that they're doing are to the country, which are fundamentally undemocratic.
But if you were in charge of the country, would you want a critical population able to deconstruct your policies?
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? That's what the point of the ragged trousers philanthropist is, isn't it? It's art gives people power, right?
Well, I hope.
And then the other thing is, I mean, one of the other things to think about the world at the moment is that the Chinese are building art schools, the Brazilians are developing their culture, and they're saying the future is ours, and we're saying, oh, don't take away what we've got. You know, actually, what we need to say is we need to construct and picture what that future for people democratic people in Britain is. You know, that's what we need to do.
It's also, I think, people don't make the economic arguments if those are the ones that need to be made well enough, because we're a post-industrial society. We don't make anything anymore, but we do have amazing art schools, and we do produce innovators and entrepreneurs who go through those schools and become great business people, whether or not they become great artists. Some people also become great artists and great teachers and great, you know, architects, etc., etc. And I think somehow we need to make a stronger and better argument around the economic benefits of having a creative culture to sell, because what else are we going to do? We can't be a service industry. Is that what Britain is moving towards?
But to me, as a foreigner, it's
As a
stunning.
foreigner, yeah.
Knowing London, I mean, to me, it was always a hub of music, of like a film, of fashion, of like, I mean, we were traveling here in the 70s, like when I was not at art school yet, because we liked the climate, the attitude, and of course, art is always also, it's to a certain extent also disobedient. But I think we need disobedient people, because they think out of the box, because they are able maybe to address certain issues that are no more functioning within what we know, because the things we know don't function anymore. So I think it's really crucial to understand, again, I think it's a way of thinking and a way of seeing the world.
But do we have to, I mean, I was going to come back to Natasha before I open it up. Do we have to make this decision that, or division really, between, as Sally's saying, you sell it more on, yes, look, we can, you know, create growth, jobs, blah, 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 by art, or do we stick to the argument that we will just, more of a Patrick's argument, but we will just have a better quality of life if more of us, you know, have a better culture, know more things. You know, well, we've got to do both, surely. We fight on every front, don't we?
I think we need to communicate better so that people understand what it is we do and what the value and worth is intrinsically in it. Because otherwise we'll be segregated as people that other people don't understand. And therefore it will our funding will continue to get cut, and people would continue to go, well, that's not worth it, because they don't understand what it is we do. And I think it is a communications job, it's almost a PR job, to be able to get people that don't do what we do to understand it, but also to value it. And I think at the moment there is no value to it. It is seen as a nice to have or an extracurricular activity, rather than an essential, integral one to any kind of human development.
Well, I have to say, I mean, I'm a journalist, and I don't go to art school, but I come here because my friend Lorraine works here, and I wouldn't know what goes on, and I see what goes on, and I'm amazed by it, because lots of it isn't what I even would think was art. Do you know what I mean? I'm educated every time I come here, and people are doing all sorts of things. You do need to get out and tell them.
But also, you mentioned the Olympics and Danny Boyle's Spectacular. Would a normal person, would your mum think of that as art and design? Probably not.
I don't. That's a good question.
I mean, we see as art, and I struggle with art and design, like I said.
What word would you prefer?
Creativity is, I think, more accessible and understandable.
I think the thing about the Olympics is interesting, is that the toys took it on, didn't they? And they actually did make it happen, and it was a huge success. And I thought they wouldn't be able to take it on, because I don't think Conservative politicians do bread and circus politics very well, because they're too mean to bake any bread and they don't know anybody in the circus. But the point is,
they knew you to get,
but
they?
now I think they understood that it was quite a powerful thing, and it didn't win any BAFTAs the other night. I think they're trying to bury it.
Oh, that's
Like they
interesting.
buried the 1951 exhibit. It was the
Interesting.
Conservatives who pulled down the Skylon.
Great exhibition.
Because they don't like that kind of activity, because
That's
it's power.
But again, to me, it's interesting because, like, again, coming from the outside, in Germany, it's usually the Conservatives who supported culture, and it was Labour, the equivalent of Labour, who was opposing it as something that is exclusive. Collectors usually are not coming from the poorest part of society. Fashion labels are maybe not people who have low income, they might not be the ones who can buy the brands that coming out of culture. So I come from a context where actually the conservatives were the bigger supporters of culture. And it was a learning process for like the general society, how much they actually also gain by access to culture. So I see it a little bit coming into a reverse context. And again, I think the question, I would agree with you. I mean, I would not say it necessarily need to be called creativity, but the question is really, what does art contribute to our societies? It doesn't matter, or left, right, I think it's something essential, and it makes us more critical and maybe more out-of-the-box thinkers. And I think we need to question what's going on in the world.
Definitely. I also think that we talk a lot about the government and external factors and how they perceive us, but I think there's also a point about how we perceive ourselves.
Exactly.
I felt like an imposter at art school because I wasn't an artist as such, and because I could have done other things, but I chose to do art. And I felt like maybe that wasn't everyone I met, you know, they didn't come from that kind of background. And I went into it going, right, it's fine, I'm never going to make any money, I'm not going to be, you know, what is sort of traditionally seen as successful, but I'm going to do it anyway. And there are perceptions, I think, from an internal perspective that we can break down, as well as external.
Okay. But with this enormous costs, and I want to come back to that, I mean, like, how do you feel yourself if you spend whatever amount it is on tuition, first on your bachelor, then on your master? In the meantime, you have to have a PhD if you want to go into higher education as a teacher. If you line that up, I think the pressure of like free thinking and I want to be different in the world looks very luxurious. Yes. And I think that changes ourselves, how we approach it, how our students approach it, knowing here like the loan, the debts to the bank are increasing. I mean, how much of a free thinker are you after that? You have to give back bank loans.
But there's no, I'm just going to open up now, but this is the situation we're in. That's not going to change. I mean, it's
Who
more.
says?
Well, do you think if Labour got in tomorrow that we would abolish student loans?
In Austria, they had, and in Germany, they had to take tuition back.
And you
So-
think that's could happen here?
I'm not saying it will not happen by itself, but that is clear.
Yeah.
But why can it not happen?
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Questions? To, you can direct them to individuals or to the whole panel.
Want me first?
Yeah. Sorry.
Uta, I think I'd like to start with reversing your question. You asked what art can contribute to our society, but I think probably a better way, my approach would be, you know, how can we make a society where the values and standards of art are part of the everyday cultural fabric of our society? And I think that involves looking at, well, what are those values and standards of art that we should make central? And I'd like to agree halfway with Bob, who I also like Hannah Arendt a lot. And I think her ideas on participation and democracy and art and politics are really interesting. But I do think there's an elision you made that I would not agree with, and that is an elision between culture and art schools, because I think culture is broader and wider than just art schools. And the way I'd say, in the spirit of free thinking, I'd like to say I don't think that the main problem for the art or for society today is actually things like tuition fees or even political intervention per se, although those are problematic, and I'm not a supporter of them, but I don't think they're the main problem. I think the main problem is a real profound confusion as to what art actually is. You said it's not about the students, Uta, and I totally agree with that. I don't think it's about economics either, and it's not about politics. I think politicians would be very happy if we all thought that political activity consisted of making artistic products, because then we wouldn't be out doing politics, which is what really changes society. So I think that is a really fundamental question that needs to be addressed. And at the level of what's happening in schools, I mean, certainly I, a teacher and researching education, and so what I can see is that actually a lot of art is very much just about the students. It is that very banal, diluted, romantic idea that art is all about self-expression. There is a lot of art going on in schools, not necessarily in the form of the codified curriculum, but there's, you know, projects and outreach stuff abound galore. But they're all projects that are based on really things that are pure individuated expression with no introduction, no sense of wanting to introduce young people to the subject of art, you know, art, the objective forms of art, which you have to learn and practice before, you know, going off into your free creativity.
There was a question. Shall we take 2 or 3 questions
Yeah, good
and then
idea.
come back? There's somebody down here at the front.
She's got one.
Thanks. I was very interested in the word that was introduced earlier. I had an arts infrastructure. And the reason I'm quite interested in hearing more about ideas, kind of overlapping what you were saying, art in a wider context. I myself, my work, I'm an alumni of London Arts and qualified secondary school English teacher, and I teach sixth form art. And as a result, I sort of see how students are fed into a system. And I'm obviously at the step where students that I teach, I'm one of the people who they talk to about if they're going to go into university to study art or not. And as a result, I see them coming in at the beginning and they're already quite indoctrinated by the curriculum that I know very well from the years that I taught secondary school. And I find that I need to break their thinking and open their minds and see art related to not only self-expression. And then there's the second step, which is about how do I convince them to study art? And this is when they do also hear from back home similar arguments that there won't be money in it, that, you know, and it's expensive. So I thought I wanted to hear a little bit more from Natasha about the kind of, I think you said you ran some kind of a course. How do you, could you tell some practical examples, for example, or kind of thought projects where you have applied or, you know, taken this creative thinking or to?
Sure. I was really lucky enough to not be hampered by bureaucracy in the school I was working in. So I didn't have to go through lots of red tape to be able to create a syllabus or anything like that. So
Where was this, Natasha?
this was at Pratt Institute in Brooklyn in New York. And I just went to the head of course and said, I'm doing innovation day by day. Would you mind if I changed the course? She said, go for it. So essentially, I made it up. I could apply lots of things to it, but I really did make it up, and it was basically what I was doing every day. So if you had a problem, the briefs were as simple as this. If you had a problem in a certain area, so for example, it could be there's a drinks market that's completely saturated. How would you create a new drink? And I would let them go ahead and explore. And I didn't put too many different structures in place. I would do it through critique. So they would come in with different ideas and I would start to question them, because to me the value of art school was learning to ask why. That was the thing that I learned the most. So through this sort of question and answer critiquing process, their work would evolve. Sometimes it would be around subjects and trends. So, for example, I'd set a project around sense of authenticity. So I'd say, right, in our world right now, I think we're all yearning for authenticity. Everything's so fast, everything's so transient and temporary. How can you apply creative thinking to authenticity, for example? So the projects were always really, really varied, and they were led through discussion. And they were also encouraged to critique themselves together. So at the beginning of a semester, I'd be very involved in that discussion. At the end, my goal was to sit back and not actually say anything and let them talk themselves.
It's interesting, I think, because what you're talking about is very much about the economic value of arts, potentially, which is, the problem at the moment is that how can we talk about the quality of arts in schools when even the basics are under threat? But I don't think these are two separate issues.
Sure.
And that's why I was very interested in to hear what you
It was definitely a surprise to me when I went over to the States, the standard of thinking and output compared to the UK, I thought was nowhere near. I thought there was a lot better thinking and output here.
Yes, there's a couple of people at the front. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'd like to ask a question about, I suppose, a lot of the things that were talked about before lunch. There was a lot of stuff that came up about sort of elitism and this kind of neoliberalism and old boy networks and so on. And I suppose, which kind of leads me to think that a lot of the stuff that we're dealing with in these cuts has its kind of root, I think, in the legacy of Thatcherism. And I was thinking about the connections between Thatcherism and neoliberalism and so on, with art production and thinking about sort of neoliberal models for art production, so Saatchi and so on. And I suppose what I want to ask really is, do we need, as artists, do we need to accept political responsibility for our art as well as for our politics?
Yes. Yeah, of course. Sorry, that's just my view.
I would just like to go back to the first question, because that links, I think, to your question. And I think I agree, we should not mix up things. I think, to me, economy, politics, art, all are part of society, and I think we are part of society. So we contribute to society as well, and I think also art is a political language. It doesn't matter if it's music or fine arts, etc. We choose where we position ourselves. And I think I wish a little bit more politics to politicians, because it's really about, like, politics really has to do with the police. And I miss that actually in politics. And I think we are part of society, as is politics. And I think there is a big mix up, because we all I think we are already in a service industry. So politics, economy, creative industry should serve, but I question, whom do we serve? And I think that is, to me, the much more crucial question. I don't think there is art, that's why I said, I don't see art and science separate, but I don't also see art and society separate. And the question is much more, what is the interconnectivity between them? And this is when we come to neoliberalism. So the question is, what is the fundamental in what we do? And I think that's much more crucial. It doesn't matter on which end we are operating. And I still insist, I still think it makes a difference if you have free access to education or if you pay tuition, because this introduces a new class society.
I think there's something else that goes on in the British context, which is patrician Britain. You know, Britain is very patrician. Power is handed down. You know, it's handed down from the Queen to all the CBEs and the OBEs who sit on all the boards of all the institutions, and then they give out prizes to talented kids. You know, and then you've got a little bit of power which you can surf back up that power structure. The interesting thing about art is that it's about giving power to children, actually, on some level, and saying you individually are, and that's what democracy does as well. You give people a vote, you say you're powerful. And so it has a powerful democratic role, which is anti the patrician thing, actually, although all the prizes and things are part of the patrician thing. So it's kind of, you know, the power structures and elites and how all that works definitely need constantly questioning, I think.
I have to say that my thinking has changed a lot since I left London. So I worked in London for 15 years at the Serpentine Gallery, doing, you know, amazing exhibitions, lots of work, blah, blah, blah. Moved to Liverpool. And the experience of living in Liverpool, where actually the Biennial, which has now been going for 14 years, 15 actually, and was formed by my predecessor, Lewis Biggs, has really played a role in people's everyday lives. Like, they have to trip over art on the way to Primark. They have had it in their schools. And during the Biennial, we have something like 692,000 visitors to the city. So it does change things. And actually, really weirdly, have 120 volunteers and young people working with the Biennial, many of whom have had that experience over many years of normalising the experience of engaging with art, and now come to work with us. And it is like an art school in the city. And I think the role that the art school plays, and I think there's a confusion here that we mustn't lose, the role that the art school plays is like it's the research centre where people can take risks, and it shouldn't be instrumentalised, and it should be a place where something can happen that then feeds what we're then able to do in the city, what we're able to do in relation to design, what we're able to do in relation to rethinking and remaking the rest of the world. And I really have to say, because London's really confusing to live in, I think. It's too busy and there's too much going on. And you've got a whole diversity of economies here. I think when you go to a city that's struggling economically and trying to understand how to redefine itself and understanding the importance of investing in art, you really start to see what art can do in the world. And I do think we should be more confident, actually, as cultural practitioners and whatever it is, artists, curators, makers, thinkers, about what it is we bring to the world, and not always be marginalised to be seen as edutainment or spectacular kind of entertainment. Actually, it is research in the same way that science is research, and it is a way forward. It's not the only way forward, but it's part of the way forward. So I think I feel very confident, particularly in Liverpool, which is the only place I can talk about with some real confidence now, about how important that art school is to that city, and how I think, you know, I think it's actually getting stronger at the moment, despite the fees and all the rest of it. People are seeing a way forward through it. So I think.
Do you think, Sally, does it matter whether people, and I'd ask this of everybody really, does it matter that arts, from the outside, and I'm coming again from the outside, art schools don't seem to me to be very politicized places. The occupations that I went down to a couple of years ago, they weren't in art schools. I mean, Sussex has just had one. I was down at UCL a couple of years ago. Art schools do not seem to be full of radical people.
Depends who's teaching in the art schools, doesn't it?
I don't know, I'm just saying. I mean,
some of them are more political.
The Slade they were quite political.
I don't know, what's St. Martin's like?
Whatever you make of it. Because, you know, there's thousands of us.
Yeah, so is it, would you describe it, is there a lot of collaboration between the students on political issues? I mean,
we
I'm
have
just
big
asking.
sittings at the
If that's
CAS.
what you're interested in, then yeah, and if not, then no.
But the question is also, I mean, if you pay, and I experienced that in the US, if you pay such high tuition fees, and like it really makes a difference, like if you can spend 1 year of your education being engaged politically, I still think one should do it, because it's beyond our own lives, it's why we do what we do, but it makes a difference to the students. And this is why I said, like, if you have, and I really wonder why people think things cannot be changed to a different model. If we don't think we can change something, why are we even in culture? So I really believe, I mean, I don't want to sound naive or like saying we start a revolution, but I think we should really question the impact this has on us. I mean, if you leave a school with so much debt, it has an impact. I mean, you question twice, don't I need a job now? Or like, can I spend the time like demonstrating? It has an impact on us.
But don't you think, I mean, I think one of the dynamics of art schools, which has been both enlivening, because economically it's been interesting. People have made a lot of money in contemporary art. But one of the downsides of that is that all those people are quite sort of apolitical, and in contemporary art people are quite kind of quiet about politics. and institutions like the Art School, Arts Council and stuff, they're so close to government that they feel that and lots of the galleries and, you know, organisations of liberal-minded people are actually so close to government they feel they can't kind of rock the boat. And actually art is about rocking the boat, right? And one of the interesting things I've thought recently, which is a bit crass, which was Anish Kapoor recreating the Gangnam style dance in his studio. And one of the funny things about that was the people who were involved in that were Amnesty International and Index on Censorship. And they brought into play, with Ai Weiwei actually, the idea that art is about freedom of expression. So I would depart from the lady in that row there, talking about the notion of freedom of expression being somehow a bit romantic. Actually, it is really important. I mean, I know you probably don't mean exactly that, but, and you're saying we need to learn the tools of our trade sort of thing, but actually that is a really important, powerful tool for artists to use, because around the world, artists and writers and journalists are being crushed, and it's only Index on Censorship and Amnesty in this country which are highlighting that actually. And so it's just an interesting dynamic. So there's the economic angle, there's the educative angle, but there's also the freedom of expression angle.
And freedom of movement with that, because artists aren't being allowed due to immigration laws as well.
Into this country, yeah, it's crazy. You can't do shows with artists.
It's
got much
to leave 2 weeks after your graduation now. I mean, like, people come here and would like to have professional experience, and they study here, and now they have to leave literally 2 weeks after graduation.
It's
But we
terrible.
do get professional experience here sometimes. I mean, we get all kinds of things here, depending on how you use your course or what you do. Like, it's so varied that the idea of hearing that it should be political, or it should just be for beauty, or it should be this, or it's professional art, there's so many things that it is. Kind of hard to make all these blanket statements and to make any of them be true, because it's all of those things. Oh, sorry. Hello.
They couldn't hear you at the back.
It's everything. It's a huge school, and it's not just this one. All of the different art schools. There's there's the design courses and the art courses, and whether you think it's important to differentiate between the two, making all these huge statements about what art school is and isn't is almost, I don't know, almost pointless, because we all do use it differently, and it's so self-directed for most of us as well that, like, for someone like me, it's working, like, I'm doing an MA now, I've already done a BA, and my career is working out fine. Maybe that's just me, I don't know whether that's the school or whether that's me, but it almost just makes the whole thing slightly, on that level, irrelevant. But on the other hand, there's a lot of,
But what made you interested of coming here today?
because I'm in class right now, so I thought I might as well come down and see.
No, I just would be interested.
No, I'm interested to hear about it. I didn't know how it was going to go. I'm most interested in hearing sort of what Natasha was talking about the difference, because I'm American, obviously, the difference between the American system and the British system, because I started my undergraduate in San Francisco and then moved here. But I'm originally from the American Midwest and from, like, a really poor place. But obviously all the schools there, all the universities, you're paying thousands and thousands of dollars to go there. So when you say there's more creative freedom there, or however you want to call it, or maybe not creative freedom, sorry, that was the wrong word, but I don't know, more openness, or what was the word that you
more
used?
openness in the system from a teaching perspective. So I didn't have to go through, have you done this, have you done that? I started teaching when I was 24.
Yeah.
There's no way I would have been able to do that here. I didn't have an MA, all of that. I wouldn't have been able to do it because of red tape here.
Yeah.
But I didn't find the same freedom when it came to the students and the work they were producing.
Yeah, and I would agree, because I think the arts is just generally not as encouraged there for whatever reason.
However, I was at a school where people were paying $100,000, which just sounds absolutely insane to me. And this formed the context of my opinion as well, actually. A year. I could not believe that they were spending that much money and not working as hard as I thought they could be working. If I had begged, borrowed, stolen that kind of money, I would be putting everything into it.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know. There was definitely a bit of apathy, and I can theorize about well, you know, someone else was paying for it.
Is it finishing at that level? Is it finishing school?
You know, it definitely didn't feel like that. It definitely didn't feel like that. And not only that, I went there, and because I also did a student exchange from St Martin's to that college. So I studied there and I taught there. And I remember going there and I had to pay for my own materials. And I didn't have any money. I couldn't afford to pay for the materials. And I remember going, you've got to be kidding me. How are these people spending $100,000 and then paying for all this stuff? But actually, I think it created a bit of laziness.
Yeah, and it's interesting coming here too to hear all of the sort of everything about the tuition fees, because even me as an international student, I'm still paying less than I would be paying as a home student in the US. And so it is, it's all interesting in that relative way.
But because that's normal for you, you treat it differently. Whereas if I were going into higher education now, I don't know that I would go into art school at £9,000 a year.
We already know that less people are applying. Johnny, did you want a question there? Have your hand?
I had a question here, if it's possible. I'm an international student, and I'm really humbled to be here in a space where we discuss the importance and preciousness of creativity. Because, for example, in my country, the word artist mainly means you're an Oriental dancer, and that's it.
Where are you from? Sorry, I can't see.
I'm from Lebanon.
Okay. Sorry, it's just dark and I can't see.
There's a new art school in Lebanon.
And from what I've learned today and my experience so far in Centre St. Martin's is that the art school is mainly a Victorian invention, and this is something that the speaker said earlier. And I feel that the discourse today is mainly based on how we can save this Victorian invention in a world that has changed. And it's very painful for me to come here with such high expectations and see how, because the world has changed, the economic things have really crippled such an important institution. And I really would like to invite ideas from you about how the art school can reinvent itself, redesign itself as a place for people who also appreciate the importance for creativity all around the world, not just the UK. Of course, the UK's decision for home students is really important, but because of the position of art schools like Centre St. Martin's, it's a home not just for UK students, but for students from all over the world, like me.
But I think universities have these places where people from different cultures, different geographies, different conditions of societies meet and can exchange those. I mean, like as we just exchanged with her, like it's different in the US, you say in Lebanon it's different. I think these are moments where you really have this potential of exchanging different models of society, and I think this is really important to us to understand the world, that there are differences in cultures, in conditions of living, in freedoms. And I think it's important we learn and know about that. This is why I said in my school what was really important to me was meeting my peers. The teachers were important, they were kind of the umbrella, but it was important with whom did I study. And I'm still in touch with them 30 years later. Not with everybody, but with many of them. And they made a difference into my life. And I think this kind of exchange to me is important. And the question is, who has access to that?
Sorry, I know the person is political, but the reality is that in prison and in the mental health system, art and design and artists and designers have a massive role in changing and enhancing people's lives. The problem with the question, what is art school, is that it focuses a debate about the art school, which is not the debate about the future that needs to be broader. Many of our students engage in a passionate and fantastic way with social change. And it seems to me that this discussion has become, rather insular. And it's not a criticism, but I do feel that the breadth of what we do probably can't be answered in one simple way, and that we accept that. And I've enjoyed everybody's account. I do agree that we have to learn how to communicate the impact of art and design. And actually, I think that the way we think actually will and can change the world. But we need to become clearer about how we explain what we bloody will do here. Sorry.
Yeah, so I'd just like to say as well, thank you. One of our student ambassadors from Widening Participation. I've noticed there's quite a few here. We actually employ about 40 or 50 students who work for us in Widening Participation. We go into prisons, we go to youth centres, we go to a variety of different cultural organisations. the students lead on delivering a variety of different art and design programmes. And the great wealth there is that we work with our international students. We don't just take on student ambassadors who are from a WP background, but we work with globalisation. So we make sure that we take students, our international students, out onto the street, working in our youth centres, working in our cultural organisations, youth offenders, young youth offenders, and they help. I've seen Charlie here, Sharif here, there's quite a few students. I don't see any others, and Sam. And thanks for all that great work you do. But we are doing it. You know, I just don't see why it's not getting out there enough. But the students are really impacting. And of course it's done politically without shouting it out, because they're on the ground and they're working with our young people, which is fantastic.
It's not getting somewhere. I'm really sorry to put in. It's not getting somewhere because we're intrinsically taught, and it's supported by government, that this is a waste of time, that it's a luxury item if it's in prisons, if it's in schools, wherever it is. People are indoctrinated into the idea that it's an elitist thing, that a few of us have, and that it's a waste of time, and almost like, let him have his balloon.
Yeah,
Do you know what I mean? That we're going to get over it. That's a problem. That's what we're always going to be up against. And what I was going to ask earlier, when we had, I was fascinated what he said about how many people would associate creativity with the Olympics. We had the world watching us, and we didn't do anything. We allowed the government to wheel us out, put us on show, and then when the cameras are no longer on us, they take the fucking money off us. Yeah. And they try and finish us off, do you know what I mean? They do nothing to support us, but they want to show us off when it suits them. Yeah. And I think we have to get politicised as artists. We have to, for the survival of art.
Hi. I think one of the dangers we have here as well is with the new curriculum, which already schools are beginning to take on, they're reducing the choices for young people at 14 now to often two practical subject areas in the GCSE curriculum. Malcolm Quinn talked this morning about almost every major conglomeration having an art school. So a large town or a city would have an art school. And talking about the importance of this in the north that Sally's just, very well articulated. I think one of the dangers we've got is that 5 years down the line, we may not have that many art schools in the country.
Or galleries.
I think certainly the Royal College, certainly Central St Martin's will continue to survive, but in the northern regions and in other regions, they will probably start to reduce in number.
Okay, can I just take, because I think we've got to I'm going to take two more questions, that guy there and that lady up there at the back. Because they've both had their hands up for ages, and then I think we probably are going to run out of time. So
sure, I'll try and keep it really brief then. My question was really like, we were talking about advertising ourselves better or selling ourselves better to the political classes, but are we selling ourselves short by trying to appeal to the chamocracy, as someone put it earlier, the people who clearly don't give a damn about the polis or the people and the development of the human self? And in fact, we're selling ourselves short by giving an economic argument, because we're saying, hey, we'll make you money, we'll make your banks more money, we'll make our economy more money. And shouldn't we just say, actually, should we still be voting? Because does it even matter who we vote for if they're all going to trash our education and our arts? Should we instead be trying to do things our own way and, setting up our own schools and teaching our kids the way we want to teach them instead?
You can. One more question. Sorry, right at the back.
Ask a question to Natasha before the questions taken up at the top.
Yeah.
Just wanted to ask, how did CSM prepare you for the world of work? One of the things that I find, being someone who's set up a company, is that it didn't prepare me for dealing with clients. It didn't prepare me for the fundamentals of working the way that we work. So I just wanted to know, how did CSM prepare you, and what skills did they instill in you that you're still kind of using to this very day?
It didn't, but it did give me confidence. The one thing it did was we'd have critiques of 80 to 100 people in a room. So when I went out off on my own and I was in front of someone trying to show them my work and talk about it, I could do that. But in terms of practical skills, pragmatic skills, no, I was just telling someone today, I remember not knowing how to do an invoice and my client laughing at me because I just didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to do at all. So no, it didn't prepare me for what happened after I stepped through the doors.
I just wanted to bring up the fact that art and music must not be lost to the national curriculum if we want other professions to excel. I query Natasha. It's a question of semantics. It's across art, design, science, or whatever. Art schools are greedy. Nothing is out of bounds. And you can also have disciplines that merge within it, and then they turn into their own particular specialities. So many medics and scientists excel in art at school, and then they have this big problem. What do? They want to become a doctor, but actually they're very good at art. And I don't believe that's a coincidence. And a lot of collectors that I've met actually are in the medical profession or scientists or whatever, because there's still the appreciation of art. I teach where students come from a first degree across disciplines. So they're from astrophysics, engineering, medics, economics, and then they go through into sculpture and art. And they're there because they want to expand innovation through experiment. And with that, they've chosen an art school as opposed to a specialist field when taking this higher course of education. And at Central St Martin's, I mentor an MAD student at the moment, and he's combining art, design, digital and social responsibility. And it's a wonderful success. It's musical instruments for old people. But are they that, or are they abstract artifacts? It depends where I see them. If I see them in a care home, they're really sensible pieces of pleasure that brings a group together. I see them in a gallery, and they're interesting pieces of art. So I would like to look at the idea of it having to respect that all this is evolved through an art school that allows for experimentation, innovative thinking, philosophy, cultural exchange, turning stuff on its head and being out in the world. And all this is encouraged. And going back to the Olympics, the idea of, well, where does Heatherwick sit? Is he installation art, architecture, design? All of that is taught in an art school.
I think we have to wind up now, so thanks for everything. And we haven't answered any of the questions.
I thought when people said we answered too simple, I said we didn't even answer.
But we tried.
But you need to answer it. You're running one. I don't need to.